him to, you bring any more chairs today?
Yeah, we'll just bring whatever's in the kitchen there. We'll
Welcome to Inari Capital, the largest online commission advance service. Inari Capital offers cash for pending residential and commercial real estate commissions to brokers and agents nationwide at unbeatable rates. Stop waiting for your commission. Open your free account today and receive cash for approved orders within 24 hours.
Yeah.
How many players are coming in?
There's 5. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Stop
5
waiting
players
for
total.
your commission. Open your free account today and receive cash for approved orders within 24 hours.
Yeah.
How many players are coming in? This is
5.
feed.
Robin.
Stop waiting for your commission. Open your free account today and receive cash for approved orders within 24 hours.
You want to get them all in.
Which one's gonna be?
5. So this is what you're looking at?
Stop waiting for your commission. Open your free account today and receive cash for approved orders within 24 hours.
No. It's going to be, this is,
So basically, it's just going to be sitting there not making noise,
yeah, that's just, this is
and
the
I
only
don't need
thing.
to pay attention to it.
No,
Forever.
yeah, no. You don't have to do anything.
That works.
Yeah.
Where's the camera?
You see it?
Huh?
Right. So I'll have to come over here to, right? Am I do it?
Yeah. Yes. So that's live.
So if I go this way, yeah, I'll be in my bathroom too. Okay.
I'll come in and I'll shut off after Jeff is done, a little bit before Jeff is done.
Yeah.
Are you going to do it first with them?
Jamie's coming in at 10.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna start with about 10:15.
With the team?
Start the interview, yeah.
What do you guys have going on at the office meeting?
We get the hockey team from Beverly High. They just won the state championship.
Nice.
They're coming in.
That's awesome.
5 players in the
You're a
coach.
hockey fan too, I
Yeah, I am.
Talk about the team and
That's very cool.
diversity. Yeah, there's a lot of things, a lot of stories in there actually.
That's really cool.
First time they ever won the states.
Nice.
We get the guy that the kid that just broke all the scoring records is coming. The goalie, it's like the best goalie that's ever had at Beverly High.
That's really neat.
Yeah, it's good.
know.
So we'll see. We have the Super Bowl,
Team,
the football team too. Yeah.
Try and get the basketball and baseball in there.
Yeah,
All of
Right.
them.
Right.
Or if we have a test, I can cheat.
A test.
Coffee?
So how long have you been in the whole real estate law?
Yeah.
95-ish
Yeah?
is when I kind of really shifted the focus and
Yeah.
tried to go full in at it.
Yeah.
So it's been a while.
I guess so, huh?
Time flies when you're having fun.
Almost 20 years. Oh my gosh,
I
yeah.
passed the bar in the fall in '89.
Yeah.
So I started practice in the fall of '89. You know, did a little of this, a little of that for the first
Did
few
you work
years.
in Boston or?
No, I joined my dad's firm in Salem
Yeah.
and did some of their grunt work.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of figured out what it is that I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do, and then took it from there.
Yeah.
It's been good.
Yeah.
What's your history prior to that?
Construction.
Yeah.
Yeah, for over 30 years. In one way or another, I started out of high school for quite a few years, and I ended up working for lumber yards.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Good, how you doing? Good, nice to see
For,
you. You from the local area, Rich?
yeah, on the South Shore, yeah, and then
South
eventually,
You a South Shore boy? No,
oh,
North Shore.
yeah, and then eventually ended up here.
Yeah.
And then
That's
worked
good.
in Gloucester for a company, Grant Banks, for like 13 years. Then
Yeah.
I decided I had enough of the retail, I wanted to go back into the construction thing again, so
Yeah.
I lasted almost 2 years, but then I had to get my hip replaced, and that was that.
Greg, what's your background here and prior?
I've been in real estate for 6 years now. I was a chemical formulator before that. Started out making magnetic tape for BASF back in the late 60s.
Yeah.
Stayed there for 18 years and then went on to, that's when they started making the small rigid discs that go on the computers. Went to a company that made them.
Yeah.
And then went to a company that did the stripe on the magnetic stripe on the mass turnpike tickets.
Somebody comes back.
They bought those from Japan, the readers in like 3 years worth of cards, but after 3 years they wanted to put it out to local printers.
Yeah.
Printers didn't, make it the right color, they didn't know how to make it magnetic, so we went into that business. And I got laid off about 6 years ago. Took the summer off, golfing, boating, had a ball, first summer since high school. And decided to try something totally different.
Good.
Sick
So
and
how
tired
long
of
have you
going
been
to
with
chemical.
KW?
2 years. I was with Exit before that. Yeah, I like it. A lot of my work was customer service anyway. And it's all this is customer
So
service.
you know Andrea D'Amato?
Oh, yeah.
She was over at Exit.
Yeah,
You
and
guys
she
there at
came
the same
here.
time, then she was there.
Yeah,
Now she's back at Remax.
Yeah. We all left this one up here, basically.
Yeah.
Because he was leaving Exit, going off on his own.
Ah.
He got a place over on the other side of town that you couldn't go on weekends.
All right.
We broadcasting today?
Yeah, I just heard everything you said too.
Oh, yeah? Good. My resume's out there then.
How's your renter is there?
He's disappointed.
It was between him and a couple other, two other couples. And I think the deciding factor was that the couples had 2 names versus 1. That was it.
Yeah,
Because I really wanted him to
he's kind of a quiet, low-key guy.
get
And he's really doing what he's
Seriously?
doing. Yes. Thank you. He's good, he's not a, if you have anything else that comes up, he likes that building.
They said, listen, we can build you cabins. And they kind of laughed, like,
He was willing to do that.
yeah.
He's done it before.
So maybe I'm trying to see it.
Oh, well, that's
All right,
all right.
9 o'clock and counting. My name's Jeff Stelman. I know some of you. I'm from Stelman Law, real estate firm located in Danvers. I've been a KW preferred vendor for several years now, and this morning we're going to talk about the HUD statement and just some general concepts of what it's like to be at a closing. Okay? Pick up on that. Thanks. Has anyone in here not yet been to a closing? Okay. So, the settlement statement. Most of you have probably seen it. What it is it's the document that basically captures the entire financial picture of the transaction on both the buyer and seller side. Okay, so this is where, as you approach the closing, and usually more so on the buyer side than the seller side, when they start to get nervous about, how much money do I need? What are my numbers? When am I going to get my final numbers? This is the document. Okay, why does it take so long for us to put this together? Because I think we're all used to that. We'd love to have the final numbers 3, 4, 5 days before closing, and that doesn't generally happen. So why is that the case? The closing law firm puts this together, and some of the numbers we have on our own, for instance, our fee and our expenses. Some of the numbers we get from you guys, the real estate commission, often like a final water reading, an oil adjustment, that kind of a thing. The piece that we're usually waiting on is the lender numbers, and without the lender numbers, you can't quite finalize it. So when the buyer's, scrambling, I gotta go to the bank, I gotta get my check, we're often waiting for the lender numbers. And I'm not singling out any lender. Everybody operates basically the same way. We tend to get the lender numbers a day or two prior to closing, then we put this together, and then once we put the settlement statement together, we have to get it back to the closing department. They review it, they approve it or tell us of any changes that they want. Once they kind of put their stamp of approval on, then we circulate numbers, okay? My theory on circulating this thing beforehand is I definitely like you guys to see it. Because the last thing any of us want is to be at a closing where someone discovers there's an error on the settlement statement. So as many eyes as possible, even though we create it, we kind of govern it, the lender approves it, having your eyes on it as well, I like that idea, because you may spot something, even if it's just related to the commission. Or,
That's
maybe.
what we notice first.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. Or maybe, you sent us a utility adjustment and we transposed a number or something. So extra set of eyes, I think, is always beneficial. Now, why do you guys come to closings? You come to closings because, well, in my view, you come to closings because it's the last piece of the transaction. It's your chance to sort of be there with your client, even though you don't have a primary role at the closing, but to be there with your client and offer them emotional support, just sort of see it through and kind of put that last touch on the relationship that you've created, okay? So a lot of brokers will say, I don't really know why I come to a closing, there's nothing for me to do. A lot of people outside of your field will say, oh, brokers only go to closings to pick up their check. And that's not really true. I think you guys have an integral part in a closing. Personally, I don't like it when a broker doesn't show up to a closing, because I think that you're very relevant to being there. And when you're there, I will often try to engage you a little bit in just some general conversation, because I think it's good for the relationship. You also know your clients really well. It helps set them at ease, make them comfortable, okay? So the boring part of the closing, when we start to go through all the documents, we try to keep the parties engaged and interested, and I think it's important for you guys to pay attention. And this particular document, I think it's really important that you understand it and that you have the ability, if you receive it, let's say from me the day before, that you have the ability to read through it on your own and understand it and respond to a question that your client may call you on. Even though we're the ones sending it out and we create it, at that particular point, they know you better than they know me. So they may pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, what's this? What about this? And you want to be able to respond. It shows that you are, as you have been all along, on top of everything. And supportive to them every step of the way, okay? And if they ask you a question and it's something you don't understand, you can say, you know what, I'm gonna pick up the phone and call the attorney and get an answer for you. They may not yet have a relationship with the attorney, they may not have spoken to the attorney, may not feel comfortable picking up the phone, so you can kind of bridge that for them. All right, so I've set up a sample transaction here that we're going to go through, and what we have is, we have Barbara Buyer purchasing a property from Sam Seller at 12345 Main Street in Danvers. for a purchase price of $432,500. The buyer's taking a loan for $332,500, okay? I've also set it up so that Keller Williams is the listing broker on this transaction, and a company called Buyers R Us brought the buyer in, okay? All right, so the way that I review settlement statements, and I've seen a lot of settlement statement review in my time doing this stuff, I always start with the buyer, okay? Ed, how are you?
Morning.
If you want to pick up the settlement statement right there. I start with the buyer because the buyer's side is more complex. Sometimes we'll have a seller's attorney at the closing, so the seller's attorney will take that role and do it with his or her client. Going through the settlement statement with the buyer, I always start on page 2. Okay? If you turn to page 2, you're going to see at the top right-hand side 2 columns entitled paid from borrower's funds at settlement, paid from seller's funds at settlement. So clearly if we're going to start, the buyer, borrower, same terminology there, because borrower is the person taking the loan, so that's the buyer, okay? So if we're going to start with the buyer, we're going to start in that inner column. The reason that I like to start on page 2, flip back to page 1 for a moment. If you look on the left-hand side of the page, you're going to see line numbers. And if you look at line number 103, it says settlement charges to borrower. If I start on page 1 and I tell the buyer, you got a purchase price of $432,500, you got settlement charges of $57,1058, I have lost that buyer right there, right?
Yeah.
Because they have no idea what's behind that number. And even though I'm continuing down the page, they've stopped and they're not with me anymore. And that's not good, okay? So we're better off if we start on page 2, where we're gonna break that number down, so that when we get to page 1 and we go over that number, they know exactly what it is. There are no questions at that point, okay? So if you're ever at a closing and you see the closing attorney starting to go through the HUD with the buyer on page 1, it's not a great process, I think. I don't think it's really helpful to the buyer. All right, so page 2 in that paid from borrower's funds at settlement. The top section, and I'll refer to line numbers, which are over on, again, on the left-hand side of the page. So the top section is the 800 series of line numbers. That is the area where the most, if not all, of the lender-related fees will always appear. The lender-related fees come from way back when they applied, and they had discussions with their loan officer, and the loan officer, when they apply, will give them something called a good faith estimate of settlement charges. So to the extent that a buyer may say, I've never seen these before, they probably have. Otherwise, they didn't look at anything that they signed, because typically they'll sign a good faith estimate and return it, or they may be in sitting personally with the loan officer and sign it. So they probably have seen it, they may just not. They may not remember it, okay? So I just put in a few typical lender charges here. One is called an adjusted origination charge. Adjusted origination charge can be, if you think old school of what we all used to refer to as points, everyone remembers that terminology? So that has to do with, where's my interest rate? My interest rate is at 4%. If I want to get an interest rate of 3.5, in the old days, you probably paid more in points to get that rate down. This can be related to that. It can also be related to certain definable fees, like a processing fee, an underwriting fee. It depends on the lender. I've seen it both ways. Okay, next, line 804, the appraisal fee, and you're going to see to the left of the column, POC 395. POC means paid outside closing. So this buyer gave a check or credit card to the loan officer to pay for that appraisal fee. That is quite common, because if the loan does not go through, then the lender does not get stuck paying the appraiser, okay? So It appears out there because it was already collected, so we don't want to push it into the column, so we don't collect it for a second time. Okay? All right, next, the tax service fee, $62.50. So what is a tax service fee? There's this sort of database entity that monitors tax bills that are paid through escrow and makes sure that the lenders have all their appropriate tax bills, and then they batch, like Wells Fargo. They'll pay a whole batch of tax bills all at once to the city of Beverly. And it'll relate to all these different properties that they have tax escrow on in the city of Beverly. It all goes in at once, and then the city has to sort it all out. These tax services, that's what they do. So they make sure that the lenders are getting the right amounts to include for payment at a particular time.
Does that go on all lenders? All lenders do that, or different banks have different?
Most do. Most, not all, most.
I know most take escrows, but I don't know if they hire the outside service.
Yeah, most do. Okay, so while we're up in that section, even though I don't have any other numbers, other things that could appear up there, a flood certification fee. And most lenders, well, lenders are gonna pull a flood cert. Whether or not it shows as a charge here, sometimes it does, most of the time it does actually. Appraisal review fee. That can happen in a situation where you got repairs in a purchase and sale agreement. They will send the appraiser back out prior to closing to confirm that those repairs were done. And they may charge $100, $150 to do that. Okay. All right. Continuing down, line 901. Interest on the loan. So I've set this settlement statement up for a closing dated today. So we're at the midpoint of the month, essentially. Mortgages. Payments are always due on the first of the month on a traditional first mortgage.
Can I go
Yes.
back for a second?
Yeah.
The flood certification fee, that's not always, that's just if we need to pull it, or how they determine that?
Lenders always pull it.
Yeah, they charge
Sometimes it gets wrapped into some other fee. Sometimes you'll see it charged out here.
Okay.
Just depends. All right, so mortgage payments always due on the first, okay? Mortgage payments are always paid in arrears, okay? So what we look to is what is the first full month? What is the first full calendar month on this loan? And that would be, anyone? May, correct, okay? Because we only got a half month in April. So the payment for the month of May, because mortgage payments are made in arrears, is due on June 1. Okay, so that's going to be the first payment due date on this particular loan. So we got to cover April 15 through April 30th because we haven't factored that in the first payment. So that's going to get paid at closing through what's called a prepaid interest charge, and that's what this is right here. Okay, so a lot of times, we see closings that get bunched towards the end of the month. It's fairly common in our real estate world that more closings happen kind of in that last week of the month than the 3 weeks prior. That has something at least to do with this prepaid interest concept of a little lighter on the cash flow load for the buyer at closing. Because the closer you get to the end of the month, this number's going down because there are less odd days left in the month that you have to pay for at closing, okay? So the only day of the month where you have no prepaid interest is if you close on the first. So the first of the month, if we closed May 1, you got the full month of May as the first month of the loan, payment due June 1, no odd days to account for, okay? Next item, line 1001. This is the setup of the escrow account on this loan. So below 1001, you will see entries on 1002 and 1005. 1002, we see homeowners insurance, 2 months at $80 a month, total of $160. 1005, city property tax, 2 months at $548.60 a month, $1097.20. Add the 160 and the 1097.20, and you will get on line 1001, 1257.20. Okay? So,
They load it with 2 months.
yeah, I mean, sort of what is this and what's the basis? How do they come up with it? This is a cushion of money that the lender is collecting from the borrower buyer at closing that's going to be put into the escrow account. So it's the buyer's money, and it gets held for payment towards future bills on their homeowner's insurance policy and their real estate taxes. How does the bank determine how many months of each to take? Okay? We're going to get back to that when we get to page 1, and I show you about the May 1 tax bill. It'll make a little more sense then. Okay? I do want to talk about one concept here, though, that comes up a lot at closings, and you may get this question the night before when a buyer is looking at a settlement statement. Homeowner's insurance. Okay? So lenders always require first year the policy paid in full at closing. Okay? So oftentimes you'll get a buyer who will say, well, I don't understand why they're taking it into escrow because I paid for my first year. Okay? So what we're doing here, or what the lender is doing here, is they're collecting towards the premium for year number 2.
Right.
So the lender is going to start receiving payments on May 1. All right? The renewal date on this policy is going to be April 15th, 2015. Okay? So let's just look at this. Every time the buyer makes a payment, a mortgage payment, the bank is setting aside 1/12 of the annual insurance premium into the escrow account. So they pick up May, June, July, August, September, that's 5. October, November, December, January, February, that's 10. March is 11, okay? How far in advance does a premium invoice come out? 30 days or so, roughly? Okay. So if we get to April, we would have 12 months worth. The invoice is already out before we have 12 months worth in the account. So let's go back to the fact that we have 11 months worth, plus they picked up 2 at the closing. So there's a total of 13 months worth of insurance sitting in that escrow account when the invoice comes out from the year number 2. They go into the account, they pull out 12 months worth, pay it in, and the whole thing starts over. It starts to build up for year number 3. Does that make sense?
To the bank.
Yeah,
Right,
I got a lot of money.
Not for you?
Not for me, no, if I'm paying, I pay my
Yeah.
insurance.
Well, you don't have escrow for insurance?
No.
All right, but often your clients don't have a choice on
I
that.
just went through a process with a loan officer and they want my, they wanted, what did they want? They wanted five months insurance.
That's a lot.
Plus paying the first year. I said,
Yeah, 5's a lot.
No.
Right.
and then- So that's, so different banks have different policies, but like Salem 5, I know doesn't ask for this. Maybe it depends on who the borrower is
It can.
and how much money you're putting up.
Yeah, it can. But you will find situations where your buyers will be with lenders where it's required.
Mm.
And I just want to make sure you understand mathematically how this is working. Because you'll hear that question at some point. Why am I putting money into escrow? I just paid the whole thing. Okay? So everyone understand that?
It's the same with taxes too, right?
It works the same way with the taxes. It just happens quarterly instead of annually. Okay. All right, the next line. 1101, called Title Services, Lender's Title Insurance. So I'd like you to look at line 1104, and you'll see just to the left of the column, the lender's title insurance premium on this particular loan, which is $832.50. Okay, the $832.50 is part of the number on line 1101. All right? The rest of that number, if you go to the 3rd page in your little handout, you'll see a chart. And on that chart, you have the attorney fee, the wire fee on the incoming loan proceeds, an overnight mail fee, and the cost from the city or town tax collector to produce the municipal lien certificate. Total on that chart is $720. Take the $720, add it to the $832.50, and you will be at 1552.50. So everybody follow that math?
Where is this? Is this usually on the way, the third page?
Because when they redid the HUD statement in 2010, and they determined that they were making it easier to follow for buyers, they really didn't. So all of this detail, all the detail on the chart used to show as line items on the HUD. It doesn't anymore, and that was determined to be easier.
Do all attorneys do that, or just,
The chart?
yeah?
Yeah, I
And
think
that's-
all of the different software programs that we all use either have this exact chart or something very similar, because you've got to be able to take that line 1101 and break it down for a buyer, since it doesn't appear line item by line item on the settlement statement itself. Okay, so that's how I do it. Is I take the number and then I say, okay, let's look at the first piece is the lender's title insurance premium. Now let's go look at what the rest of it is, and then I go to the chart.
You have no idea by looking at where that number came from.
Correct. So when I send out a settlement statement the day before, if I don't send the chart, how do you figure it out? You can't. So,
Even with the chart, it doesn't, it needs to indicate where it's supposed to go to.
Yeah,
If
but
you
it-
weren't there telling me, we wouldn't know.
so that's a difficult section of the settlement statement that the only way I can explain it is it is what it is. That's what we're given to work with. We're not allowed to put these items individually on line items on the HUD statement anymore. So, okay. Next item, line 1103, the owner's title insurance policy. Okay. So we saw within line 1101 is the premium for the lender's policy. Now we have the owner's policy. Okay. Title insurance, conceptually, is an insurance policy that protects the named insured on the particular policy from any defects that may arise in the title to the property during their period of ownership. Okay? Defects that happened in the past that somehow come to light and present a problem. Right? Question number one, why does the lender require a title policy? Okay? So lenders could end up owning the property through a foreclosure. If a lender ends up owning a property through a foreclosure, they do not take any chance that there may be some issue with trying to sell it with regard to title. So they require a title policy. So if there is an issue, they know that they've got a company in place that's either going to fix it, pay out for a loss, whatever the case may be. So every closing you do, you will find a lender's title insurance policy premium. It's required by all lenders. Okay? Possible exception. If your buyer is purchasing the property and only taking an equity line for proceeds, certain banks with their equity lines, depending upon the amount of the loan, may not require title insurance. That's it. Okay, traditional first mortgages, which is primarily what you're going to see on your purchases, you'll see a lender's title insurance policy required every single time. Okay?
And that number is where?
Line 1104.
Yeah, where else does it show?
That's it.
It rolls into 1101.
Right.
Okay.
Robin, did you have a question?
Yes, that's a one-time charge?
That is a one-time charge on this loan. Okay? If you are the buyer here, in 5 years from now you go to do a refinance, you're going to pay a new lender's premium, you should be given a discounted rate. All the companies offer a discounted rate.
In 5 years or something?
No, there's really no time limit. All right, how is that premium calculated? Take the loan amount as a number of hundreds and multiply it by 2.5. Okay, that's the premium calculation for a lender's policy on a purchase transaction. All the companies charge 2.5. Okay, now, the owner's policy, line 1103. Why might you want an owner's policy? Same deal. You're buying a property. If you perceive that there's a risk worth protecting, there's an insurance policy available that you can purchase. And again, it's the same as the lender's policy. It protects you as the owner from anything that may surface in terms of a title issue that happened in the past. It's a one-time premium. Policy stays in effect for as long as you own the property. Okay?
Is it required?
It is not required. Calculation for owner's policies. Here's how you do it. It's a little trickier than the lender's. You take the purchase price as a number of thousands. You multiply it by 4. Okay?
Number of thousands?
Yeah, so
Say hundred
we're gonna
on the other
take,
one?
as a number of hundreds, no, a number of thousands, that's what I
On
meant.
both of them?
Yeah, sorry about that. So 432.5, we're gonna round it up to 433, multiply it by 4. Then you add $175, which is what the companies charge for simultaneous issue of 2 policies, lenders, owners, all right? So let me get my calculator out, see if we did this right. So we got 433 times 4 equals 1732 plus 175 equals 1907. All right, that calculation that I just did to get to 1907, that is the combined total of the lenders and owners policies. If you're buying an owner's policy, you don't then calculate the lender's policy on its own, okay? What I'm gonna do with this total, I know how I got to the lender's policy cost, I'm gonna subtract it out.
Oh,
So if I subtract out 832.50 from 1907, I'm left with 1074.50. So think of it this way. I know I'm gonna have the lender's policy. Ed's shaking his head. Have I thoroughly confused you,
Oh my God,
or?
why would they do that?
That's just what he said, so they can confuse you.
All right. So we get to the lender's policy cost, loan amount times 2.5. Okay, now I say I want an owner's policy. All right, I'm gonna take now the purchase price times 4, add 175. I got to $1,907. I subtract out the cost of the lender's policy. The difference between the two is what it costs me to buy the owner's policy.
Yeah, because you're only paying for insurance for the difference between the 332 and the 432, the extra 100,000, pretty much. Is that the way they look at it?
Well, no, because you're insured for what you're paying for the property, because you're
Right, as an owner, but the lender is only insuring on their risk.
on the loan amount.
So that's why it's not gonna be the 8, it would be more because there's more risk.
All right, but think of this. Because if you're gonna buy an owner's policy, because the price of the 2 policies combined is triggered off of the purchase price, whether your loan amount is $100K or 332.5, as in this example, that total number for both policies is coming out the same every time, because it's triggered off the purchase price. Okay? Purchase price times 4 plus 175. It's the breakdown of the 2 in relation to each other that changes when you vary your loan amount. Because a lender's policy on $100K times 2.5 is only gonna cost $250. Then you're gonna take the $250, subtract it out of 1907, then you get your cost for your owner's policy.
So if you're the owner, or I guess the buyer, and that's not the owner,
Yeah.
owner's policy, if you're the buyer and says, you know, I don't have an extra $1,000 to spend on this.
Yeah.
What are the potential repercussions of that?
If you have if a title issue comes along,
What would that look like? Can you give us an example of what?
A missing mortgage discharge is the most popular variety. It's the thing that comes up the most. And while a missing mortgage discharge is generally nothing more than a paperwork matter, because the loan got paid off
Right.
when the last people bought the, sold the property, their loan got paid off. The discharge never gets to record. and now all of a sudden, you got an attorney who does a title search who says, hey, when you bought the property from these other people, their loan, there's no discharge on record. So have at it, fix it.
Wouldn't that be found though in the title search beginning?
Let's say you buy the, let's say I bought the property from you 2 years ago. Okay? Closing got done and your mortgage got paid off. Okay? Time goes, the bank that held your mortgage, they never sent a mortgage discharge, even though they accepted and posted your payoff and closed your account. Nobody's looking at it. Okay? Then all of a sudden you come, I'm going to sell my property. Right? And I'm doing the title work for the buyer. And I get my title work back and it says, hey, Greg's mortgage that presumably got paid off a couple of years ago, there's no discharge on record from his bank. So somebody's got to fix it. If you have a title policy, that problem goes away like that. Owner's title policies are like gold when it comes to issues like that. Instead of stressing and figuring out how to do it and potentially getting into a delay situation, you got a title company who will simply issue an indemnification and undertaking letter to the next title company, and your closing goes as planned. That's the minor issue variety.
Do all lenders accept that indemnification?
I've never seen a situation where a closing gets delayed because somebody won't accept a letter from a title company. Sometimes they won't accept them from the lawyer who did the closing. Okay? So let's say I did the closing. Let's say the person who bought from you didn't buy an owner's policy. Okay? So then, if I did the closing, you can look to me and say, hey Jeff, there's no discharge. And I call the lawyer who's doing the closing now and he says, I'm not going to take an indem letter from Jeff. I want an indem letter from a title company. Well, there is no title company because there's no owner's policy. Then you got to start doing work, which is going to cost you possibly some money, definitely some time. Right? That's the minor variety. Other stuff that I've seen situations where property flowing out of estates, there were some siblings that weren't accounted for in the estate. All of a sudden, somebody finds, hey, what happened in this probate with these siblings? They weren't accounted for. I had a closing several years ago where we got delayed and went through a negotiation, and those siblings appeared, and guess what? They wanted some money. Okay? If you had an owner's policy, the company would pay it. Okay? So there are things that can happen, albeit infrequently, where a policy can really save you. So the one thing I would recommend to you guys, I always tell realtors, whatever your own personal belief is as to whether you would buy owner's coverage or not, even if you have a client who says, I just don't have the money, I would never take the step of counseling a client not to buy it. Because you could get a phone call a couple years later saying, hey, why did you advise me not to buy that?
I was looking for more reasons to recommend.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
These are things that could come down.
Yeah. As far as that discussion goes, you know, there's certain things, like we interact on a lot of things during the course of a deal. That's a piece where you can always say, I think that's a better discussion to have with the closing attorney. And let me make sure that you can get in touch. Okay? Because I don't think it's really your job to explain the risks of not buying title insurance. It's just my own personal theory.
Like to give a life, get on your insurance and you
Jeff?
Yes.
And the that's right. The calculation for the owners was purchase price, thousands times 4 plus the 175. What's the 175 again?
Simultaneous issuance of two policies, lenders and owners, at the same time. It's like an add-on, and all the companies do it.
You have to push the button twice. Yeah. Very heavy button.
Okay, so let me just finish that statement, Robin. To get to the cost of the owners, purchase price times 4 plus 175 minus the lender's premium. Then you'll have the cost of your owners.
So the reason why you're subtracting out the 832, which is the lender's insurance policy, is because it's already added in to line 1101. Right? Because that's what you said, 720
Yeah,
plus the
yeah,
832
yeah.
gives you the 1552,
Yeah.
which is the cost of the 832 is in there for the, so this is what confused me. I understand it, but it
Yeah.
confuses me a little bit because we're backing it out on the calculations on line 106, the 832, to give us the 1,074.50 on line 103.
1103.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is the cost of the owner's title insurance. But so in actuality, they're paying the title insurance and they're paying the lender's title insurance.
They're paying the
also.
owners and the
They're
lenders.
paying both.
Correct.
So the way the calculation looks, the way you explain it, almost sounds like, oh, they're not paying for that, but they're paying for both.
Oh, they're definitely paying for both.
Paying for
And
that
all-
plus this and the total.
Yeah, I got that part, but that's
Is
what was.
there a reason?
Well,
for
but
you to
wait. Let's not shake the head here, okay?
No.
Everything that is represented here, there's a reason for the cost. The stuff on the chart, that's our fee and our out-of-pocket stuff, okay? So that's not, that chart is not, expenses for nothing.
Oh, that's the
Is
truth.
there a reason
No,
that
but it's
you
just,
don't put that as 1101 and then just keep the 832.50 on the 1104 line?
Because we're specifically regulated as to what can go where on this statement.
Gotcha, okay.
Honestly, again, I'll go back to that silly statement of it is what it is. We are told this is how you have to do it. I don't think this is the most simplistic way to do it.
that's why I was shaking my head, because it's
Okay,
just so
yeah.
convoluted.
It is,
You get to it,
I
it's
definitely
crazy.
agree with that.
CPAs love this chart.
I definitely agree with that, but that's why going through this, like, I can talk about this stuff in my sleep, but you guys go to closings, and I think it's important that you understand this flow. And especially, again, you may get that phone call the day before saying, can you help me understand this?
What the hell is this?
All right. Now that we're through title insurance, we're gonna speed it up a little, okay? So, next item, 365, recording fees at the registry of deeds. That covers the recording of the deed, mortgage, municipal lien certificate. No, we're still on page 2, line 1201,
Oh, it's 12, okay, thanks.
okay? So recording fees at the registry for the deed, mortgage, municipal lien certificate. State regulated fees, we collect them here from the buyer, pay them in when we go to the registry, and actually hand the documents over for recording. 165, line 1301. That's the charge to the surveyor for the plot plan. Why do we get a plot plan? To make sure there are no zoning violations. Okay, a plot plan is not a survey. Instrument surveys don't cost $165. They're more like 1,000 to 2,000. Okay,
Does every property have an insurance?
Kim, there's settlement statements right there if you want to
Okay.
grab one.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Does every property have one?
A plot plan?
Yeah. I mean, a
It's-
survey.
No, not necessarily. Probably at some point, but we're not doing instrument surveys on every closing. That's not what happens, okay? So the plot plan is sort of a baseline, minimal cost. If the surveyor can definitely tell without using an instrument that there's an issue, they'll put it right on there. If they think there's a question and they think that an instrument would be helpful to confirm, they'll tell you that too, right on the plot plan. Okay, the other thing that a plot plan that the surveyor does is they look at the flood maps and they will give you their opinion of looking at the flood maps as to what flood zone the property sits in. That's a secondary mode for a lender to determine, is this a flood insurance situation? Okay, they also see that from the flood cert that gets pulled.
Can I ask
All
a
right.
question about flood insurance?
Yeah.
Of all the changes in flood insurance and all that. A buyer, without knowing that in advance, it could be a lot of money.
I've started putting in all of my purchase and sale agreements, whether or not I see it in the offer, contingency for not being in a flood zone. Because I'm getting away with it sometimes, not all the time.
Because that, I mean, conceivably, that could be a lot of money that
It
they're
could
not
be.
expecting. And then, I have a house where they're fine, it's only been 2 years, they wouldn't even be aware that it might have switched.
My secondary position on that, if I can't get away with it, if a lawyer calls me out on it and says, hey, that wasn't in the offer, I'm not giving you that, is I'll say, you know what, give me 1 week to get my plot plan. Because I have a good enough relationship with my surveyor, I call him up, I say, get this one done fast. And then I'll also call the lender and say, can you pull your flood cert right now? So I've had that work, that type of situation. Kevin?
Jeff, I own a beach property in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And so I'm just asking, in Massachusetts, I know that I'm paid August to August. If I sold it in January, I can transfer that, I've already prepaid it to
Flood?
the new owner, flood insurance.
Flood can be transferred, I don't know all the particulars of that, but I have seen it happen.
But you don't know if that's, in Massachusetts, it's just standard?
I saw it happen on a closing I did recently on a condo, that
Okay.
a flood policy on the individual unit got transferred from
Right,
the seller to the buyer.
okay. Well, because it's federal, so it would be,
Yeah.
right?
There are some funky new Fannie Mae rules on that stuff though that I
Okay.
learned in that closing.
All right.
All right, total in that column, 571058. Okay, go to page 1. Line 101. Buyers purchasing the house for $432,500. Line 103, they have settlement charges totaling $57,1058. Now we feel better about that number because we've exhausted it, right? Okay. Line 104. May 1st tax bill to the town of Danvers, $1645.80. This is a quarterly bill covering. That's okay. There are settlement statements at the back of the road. This is a quarterly bill covering April, May, June. So April 1 through June 30th, right? Buying the property April 15th. So we're gonna pick up a credit from the seller, April 1 to April 15, when we get to the lower part of the page. Okay. Oil adjustment. We all know that oil is very expensive these days. You have a full tank of oil and it's getting adjusted at closing. That's a heavy hit for a buyer to find out about a day or two before. I think it's a really good idea to just let a buyer know in advance. If a house is heated by oil, if the tank is going to be anywhere near full, that's a decent chunk of money that's going to be part of your numbers if you're closing. Right? All right, we add up all those numbers, total 440, 656, 38. Okay? Then we're going to take away from that, line 201. The buyer paid a total of $20,500 with the purchase and sale agreement and contract to purchase. They're being given a loan by their mortgage lender, $332,500. Okay? The seller's portion of that May 1 tax bill, so basically April 1 to April 15, $271.20 appearing here as a credit. And then lastly, line 216, when you made the offer with your client,